Good afternoon, everyone, again. So for the next Fireside chat, we'll switch to English. It's a pleasure for me to present my fellow co-speakers, Mr. Alexis Patelis, Chief Economic Advisor to Greece's Prime Minister, and Mr. Randall Tucker, Chief Inclusion Officer of Mastercard. Good afternoon, sirs.
Thank you.
So first things first. Our conversation's topic is how diversity, equity, and inclusion efforts lift us all. That acronym, DEI, quite a hot topic of discussion, both in the business and the government agendas. Isn't it, Mr. Patelis?
Yes. Thank you very much. Good afternoon, everybody, and thank you for those who've joined us this Saturday evening instead of going to watch the lovely sunset in such a beautiful location that we have. Oh, there's an echo. So diversity, inclusion, equity, very important for the government. I would say that this is the first government that has a specific plan, an action plan for different groups, segments of the population. For example, this week the plan was announced for the Roma people. We have a plan being developed for homelessness. We had on Autism Day, we had a plan revealed on autism, and myself, I had the honored and privilege to be participate in the committee that drew the strategy for equality for LGBTI people. Diversity, equity, and inclusion lifts us all for the simple reason that we're all part of society and we all need to be included.
But what does DEI actually mean when it comes to business? Mr. Tucker, why does it matter?
Yeah, so it goes back to the so what of it all. And hello, everyone in the room. I've been in this space for over 20 years, and the evolution of the word, it was at first diversity, and then they put inclusion, and then it was inclusion and diversity. Now it's diversity, equity, and inclusion, and it's evolved over many years. I think the so what of it all goes into three main buckets. One is around it's the right thing to do. And at Mastercard and other organizations that I've worked for, that's the central piece of it. It's the right thing to do to make sure that everyone has an opportunity to be respected, to be valued, and that their voice is heard. It also makes sense from a perspective that, too, that we're in this age now where organizations, governments are being called to a higher standard where social justice efforts are also really important. And so that translates for us in a business setting around ESG. So how do you make sure that our customers are asking for this, our investors, our shareholders, all of those organizations and entities are asking, what is your commitment to doing better? And so that's another piece. The last piece I would say, since we are a business, it's good for business. It's good for business. It's not just a social program, it's good for business. How do you make sure that what we're doing doesn't leave out anyone to make sure that we are the employer of choice, the brand of choice, as well as the community partner of choice? And you can't do that if you're leaving someone out. And so that's kind of a three-package deal for how we think about the reason and the purpose and the so of it all.
Mr. Patelis, what is your opinion? How do business and government work together when it comes to DEI? Does they one follow the other? How can collaborate in a better way, probably?
Thank you very much. Well, it's chicken and egg issue as always. And the role of government is to create the right institutional framework, but also to lead by example. And business obviously operates in an environment of regulation set by government, but also, as Mr. Tucker mentioned, has its own priorities and can help society as well. So for us, there's a legislative aspect. For example, in the law that we passed a year ago, there was greater equality between fathers and mothers in the way that the law treats them. And we have many such examples through legislative agenda. You then obviously have to visibility issue and to talk about these issues, and this is where my role comes in. And of course, ultimately, you also have to represent people in government. I will note today. This is my 5th panel at the forum. I'm sure everyone's followed all 5. But I will tell you, this morning I spoke about debt and economic growth, and the audience was more or less the same number of people as today, but was predominantly male. And today I'm looking at the audience, and it's predominantly female. And that tells us that we have a long way to go still. There is segmentation in the way we approach issues, and hopefully there will be a point in the future when there will be greater equality. Thank you.
Mr. Tucker, what are the main challenges for multinational companies and corporations like Mastercard for expanding DEI strategies in terms of localization in countries that human and LGBTQ+ rights have not yet been conquered?
It's an interesting question, because I think you have to take a step back and ask the question, well, how do we even think about global inclusion and diversity within our organization? And at Mastercard, the reason why I was brought into the conversation, into the organization, is to make it more relevant and make it global. So that was the remit that I had, is to make this thing relevant and global. The way that we did that was to work with each region, and we have 5 regions around the world. We have over 210 countries that we operate in, but we have 5 distinct regions that they're broken up into. And so the way that we, in order for us to figure out that strategy for inclusion and diversity, it was local. We work with the regional teams to figure out what would make sense, customizing inclusion and diversity action plans, as well as things that we would do in order that our employees are safe. Because you can't talk about inclusion and diversity and not have a piece around, especially with an LGBTQ+ population, around whatever you're going to do, is it going to be safe for the employee? And so that was the starting point. And then other things are, is it going to just be internal things that we do versus external? And so it looks differently around what we do in the organization. But at the end of the day, we want to make sure that this community feels that they have a right to work for our organization and stay and be happy and have engagement, as well as that they see the things that we do, like True Name, a card that was meant where you can put your name on it. Whatever name that you want to put on it, especially with the non-binary, transgender community, making sure that they have an opportunity to express themselves in the way that they want to do that. So it's really impressive around that as well. And then the things that we do in society, making sure that we're signing pledges for LGBTQ marriage equality and things like that. So the bigger picture is it's local in context of how we build strategy, but there's some things across the board that we've done to make sure that everyone feels that they're in part of the process, whether that be hiring, whether that be our marketing efforts, or whether that be how we engage our society.
Thank you. So you're both out and proud gay men in, let's say, highly visible positions of power.
Yep.
Being out and successful at work wouldn't probably have been possible a generation ago. How does your sexual orientation affect how you lead? Anyone can answer.
It shouldn't, but it does, in the sense that it forces you, having accepted yourself, it forces you to be more tolerant of other people, and that can be in many different dimensions. I should also mention that in Greece, in particular, a lot of times people say, well, who cares what you're doing in your private room? This is none of our business. It's just not the case. We are social animals. We hang out with other people. We form relationships, close relationships, friendships, etc. And we don't just procreate, and we don't just have sex for pure enjoyment. So this is part of our life. But being able to be out at work is a prerequisite to being successful, because it allows you to focus on your job as opposed to on something else. I don't know, Randall might have a different perspective.
No, I think it's a piggyback on that. And your question was, being out and proud, how does that affect the way I lead? Well, I think it goes back to the definition of diversity. So for me, diversity means all the things that make us both similar as well as different. And so none of us are a carbon copy of each other. All of us are diverse. I just so happen to be gay, and I'm also black, and I'm from the U.S. All of these things inform the way that I lead teams, the way that I develop strategy, just like anyone else in this room. Even if you have green eyes and brown eyes and you speak a different language, that's the lens that you use in order to lead based on your authenticity that you bring to the table. What I'm really excited about at Mastercard is that we want you to bring that authenticity, you're gay, you're straight, you're gay, whatever that is, in order to better enable us to better lead people that are like us, have empathy, as well as ultimately, at the end of the day, because of who I am, I have a greater connection to what it is like to sell to a black gay person that's married, that's from the U.S. That's the reason why inclusion and diversity is so important, because it gives you greater understanding of your end customer.
Can you tell us a bit more on the role of Chief Inclusion Officer? How has it evolved during these 20 years that you've been in this position?
Well, I started off by the name has changed. I mean, quite honestly, I don't even care about the name. It could be just people officer. Everyone is nice to each other. I don't care what but what I would say is that this topic has become center stage in leadership levels within the organization, that I remember when I was starting out 20 years, I was the last item on the agenda. And that was not even in a board meeting. That was just in a meeting, just a normal leadership meeting. But now today, having the opportunity to get in front of our board of directors on a regular basis, and they want to understand what progress is being made, what are the challenges and the roadblocks, how can we help you? It shows that, one, that this work is a priority within the organization, and that, two, that the work is one that is really important to the business, because the board would never even have that as an agenda item if it wasn't important.
What responsibilities do you feel you have as role models for the LGBTQI+ community?
Randall was asking me earlier when we were having a coffee, you know, what's different about Greece and LGBTI issues, and I answered visibility. Visibility is very important. What does that mean? That people want to see themselves, see a version of themselves in leaders, and this also includes government. Randall mentioned that it's important for a salesperson to be able to connect to their customer. Well, it's also important for government to be able to connect with the citizens, and when the citizens don't see themselves being represented in government, then they don't believe that the government is representing the citizens. And this is a very important issue. I'm always touched by the people who come up to me after events and either come out to me or identifies themselves. Ultimately, this is the responsibility of anybody who's at any type of leadership position or any type of senior position. They are stronger than somebody else by definition, and they need to use that extra power and strength that they have to make other people feel more comfortable and feel more included.
Ditto. What he said is the answer to it. I think that the gentleman, I guess the panel that was right before this, the gentleman that was on the stage, he said he got the opportunity because he had proven himself, because he was really good at what he did. And I think that's the most important piece for me, is that not only the representation, so you and I represent and have roles where we have a tremendous amount of reach within our organizations and in our countries and governments. But if we were not good at what we did, it would be a bad representation of our community. And so my ultimate is to do the best job that I can do, represent, and then have the ability to pay it forward in the lessons that I've learned and being and speaking events like this, where you can share your story and to help someone else.
Being good, being successful, yeah, exactly. The gentleman, the speaker before, is a very well-known screenwriter and director and actor in Greece. So, what advice would you give for others who are thinking about how to create a DEI program or strategy in their business?
One, I would say, in the early days when it didn't work, one of the things was it was this groundswell. It was like grassroots at the bottom of the organization trying to make something happen at the top. At the end of the day, nothing from a corporate perspective will happen until the CEO, senior leadership team says this is important. And my role was to kind of share the landscape of what are you missing by not doing this work? How much money are you missing? How much brand reputation are you missing? How much engagement are you missing from your employees? And if you set the stage, it's up to them to figure out what they want to do. So one is just to make sure that it's a strategy that's being authored by the most senior folks within the organization. I think two is, painting the landscape for the employees within your company to say, you're doing this diversity thing, but what does that mean? Like, what's the strategy? What does that look like? So being able to share what the strategy is and how you're going to hold yourselves accountable to that. And then lastly, I think the accountability piece is really important because you can talk, I can say all of these great things, but if it doesn't translate into getting something across the finish line, marriage equality, getting across the finish around inclusion, education, and awareness so everyone can be a more inclusive person. If those things don't happen, and we say that we value everyone, and we say that we do these things, if those things don't happen, it doesn't really matter. So it's the actions that are taken after you say what you're going to do it.
I'm just going to say, just do it. I mean, that's my advice.
Mr. Patelis, one last question for you. Let's make a wish for the next year, within a year, until the 8th Delphi Economic Forum. What's your goal in terms of DEI?
For the forum or in general? I'm gonna note something for those who are watching us online. I will say this again. There's more people in this session than there was in my morning session, which was about Greek debt. And Greek debt is, it's a lot of it. So it's clear that there's an interest in the subject, and this is probably the most heartwarming aspect of the whole thing. And I guess the wish is that at the next forum, we are earlier on in the day or on a different day, and there's a broader array of panels and discussions. I think there's a genuine interest to think about these issues, and there's just not so many opportunities in Greece to think about them, of how can we make diversity, equity, and inclusion lift us all. And I think this is a very basic human need that people have, to feel that they're included and to make sure that their fellow citizens are included as well.
Thank you very much for sharing your experiences. It's been a blast. Thank you.